Hi, my name is Paul Sargent. Welcome once again to AP Euro Bit by Bit. Today we're going to take a look at one of the more controversial figures of the European Enlightenment. He's a figure of the later Enlightenment, and his ideas have been misinterpreted or reinterpreted or interpreted correctly throughout the centuries, even in his own lifetime. This guy provides us the bridge between the Enlightenment and the coming Romantic movement. His name? Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Before we get started with him, cue the intro. Okay, so Rousseau is an interesting figure here, and he's one of the major figures of the Enlightenment. In fact, in the history of the Enlightenment, he has perhaps the most lasting impact of all of these philosophers in so many different ways, and perhaps the most radical impact. But let's start with his early life, because it is important to understand where he came from. Rousseau was born into the Geneva of John Calvin, and if you've seen my video on John Calvin, you'll know that Geneva was a place in which John Calvin had created a theocracy in which people were governed by the religious views put forth in John Calvin's works. This is going to influence Rousseau throughout his life. Now, we're going to focus on three of his works today, just to give you an introduction to what his ideas are and what they mean. And then we'll take a look at the lasting significance. So the first work we need to look at is Rousseau's Discourse on the Origins of the Inequality of Mankind. And in this, he puts forth the idea that private property is really the problem with modern day society, at least his society, and people today tend to jump on Rousseau for like, hey, maybe this guy was right. The idea is that society has corrupted the natural goodness of people. And it was the creation of the idea of private property that started us down this bad road. Because private property created the need for someone who could protect private property. This social contract idea is there. Man needed protection for their property, thus governments came around to protect the property, and people had to give up some rights in order to have that government succeed. And so society has actually gone about and created the problems that it sees in society. And that's basically the idea here. So to quote Rousseau on this, let's take a look at this passage. The first man who, having enclosed a piece of ground, thought of saying, "This is mine," and found people simple enough to believe him, was the true founder of civil society. How many crimes, wars, murders, how much misery and horror the human race would have been spared if someone had pulled up the stakes and filled in the ditch and cried to his fellow men, "Beware of listening to this impostor. You are lost if you forget that the fruits of the earth belong to everyone and that the earth itself belongs to no one." But does Rousseau call for a total abolishment of government? No. He sees government as a necessary way to regulate the behaviors that some people are going to engage in. And so he says, while government is a problem, it is a necessary problem. The second work we need to talk about is Rousseau's book, The Social Contract, which was published in 1762. In The Social Contract, he begins with the quote, "Man was born free and everywhere is in chains." And he goes about writing about the idea of the social contract. He believes that people living in a state of nature are savage in that they have to fight for survival every single day, that their life centers around the need for food, and that they can't really progress much beyond that. But he also says that there's a nobility that's inside of that the noble savage is someone who is going to live a better life more in commune with nature the way God had intended than one who is ruled by society, which he of course sees as a necessary evil. Now he adds to the idea of Locke's social contract this peace, that the government should follow the general will of the people. The general will is really the big idea of Rousseau. And the idea is that it's kind of majority rule. It hints at modern day popular democracy. However, he also goes on to say, and this is where we go back to his roots from Geneva, that there will be people who won't want to go along with the general will. Those people, he said, should be compelled to be free by being compelled to follow the general will. Now, we all know that there are problems with a completely unfettered popular democracy. There is the problem that James Madison pointed out of factions, in which one faction, because it's larger, will use majority rule to tyrannize another faction. And Rousseau doesn't really address these facts. But this idea of forcing people to go along with the general will, let's come back to that. The final work we're going to look at was titled Emil and was published also in 1762. And it's in the form of a novel, and it looks at the idea of education and society. And in it, Rousseau puts forth the idea that education should be based on a child's natural propensity for curiosity. In other words, children should be encouraged to engage in activities that promote curiosity and promote the desire to find information to satisfy that curiosity. This has long-lasting effects. Today's Montessori schools, today's emphasis on inquiry-based education is really coming from Rousseau here. He emphasizes the emotional side over the rational side of human behavior as being something which has more power. This foreshadows a movement known as Romanticism, which will really flourish in the 19th century. And he's kind of seen as the bridge between the Enlightenment and Romanticism. But there's a contradiction in Emil, which is that while he writes these great things about equality and education and, giving kids all of this nurturing and all of that, he put all of his kids in foundling homes where other people would raise them, and he didn't believe in any way, in fact spoke out very vocally, that women were unequal to men in all facets of society. Their places in the home, and to nurture children, and beyond that, really, now they shouldn't have a place. And he wasn't the only one feeling this. So quickly, let's look at the results of Rousseau's ideas, okay? If we take a look at the idea of the noble savage, it brings to light this sort of recurring theme of European history, of primitivism, of the idea that there used to be a better time where man was more in tune with his natural self, whether it be a religious self, a political self, a social self, a cult, whatever. Sort of like, you like to go camping, you like to be out in the wilderness, like you feel closer to nature. This is Rousseau's your guy here, right? But he also then goes on to talk about the general will, which is going to drive democratic societies of today. It's going to find itself into the American Constitution. But it also finds itself into the Republic of Virtue, the part of the French Revolution that's run by Robespierre and the Committee for Public Safety. And it also includes this idea that people who don't want to follow it have to be compelled to follow the general will. And that, in the French Revolution is taken to its ultimate extreme, where Rousseau is kind of the Bible of these guys, where with lots of, guillotining. So, Rousseau, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he just a guy with ideas? It's tough to say, because sometimes his ideas have been used for very, very positive purposes and have stood the test of time. Other times, those ideas have proved to be detrimental. So in the end, Rousseau's a complicated figure, and how you choose to interpret him is completely up to you and probably shaped by the beliefs that you have in your own life. Regardless, I hope the beliefs that you have in your own life think that this series of videos is really helping you. If so, please subscribe, please share, tell the world about these things, and make sure that you stay tuned because there's more to come. Till then, my name's Paul Sargent. This is AP Euro Bit by Bit. Thanks for watching.